meeting to order the Senate State Government Finance Policy and Elections Committee, this being Wednesday, February 17th, 2021. Thank you everybody for being here today and doing the important work that we have before us today. And just to mention, Senator Carlson has said he'd be late today, so we're aware of that. So he said he wouldn't be on till about 11 o'clock or so. With that, members, we're going to go ahead and do our first bill, which is Senate File 429, Senator Benson. I'll move Senate File 429, and Senator Benson, you know the routine for the audio record, and then go ahead and present your bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. I bring to you Senate File 429. As you know, we are a representative republic, and our presence here is a reflection of that representative republic. We represent people from a given geographic area. Our United States Constitution allows states to decide how electors will be appointed. It's equal to the number of representatives plus our number of senators. And two states, Maine and Nebraska, have decided to apportion their electors based on their congressional district and then their two Senate designated electors. As we look at maps post-election, we appear to be a quite divided country, red states and blue states. But you and I know that different parts of each state have a different political bent, different cultural needs, and different economic interests. And so having our electors be more granular is more reflective of the needs of the citizens of those congressional districts. And given that the Constitution apportions electors based on the count of congressional districts and our two senators, it seems reasonable then, as we seek to be more granular and reflect the voice of more people, that we would apportion our electors based on congressional district and then our statewide popular vote. This parallels our Constitution well. As you are aware, the House of Representatives is based on population of the state divided into our apportioned congressional districts, but the senators are elected statewide to represent broader interests and balance out some of the factions that can occur if you do a purely population-based apportionment. Our 9th and 10th Amendment also show us the parallel between the rights of the individual, of the people, and the rights of the state. This is built into the very structure of our federal governance, and I would argue here in Minnesota as well, where we represent geographic districts. And so, members, with that, let me review briefly what this bill does. You have the Senate summary. It would say that each major political party would appoint electors based on the congressional district and statewide, designating two statewide electors. And then when the time came to designate those electors, they would be designated based on the popular vote of the congressional district that they represent, or if they were a statewide elector, the popular vote of the state. So members, that is the bill. I am happy to stand for questions.
Thank you, Senator Benson. And members, we do not have any testifiers for this particular bills today and for Senator Benson's bill, but we are open for questions from members. Senator Fateh.
Thank you, Chair Kiffmeyer, and thank you, Senator Benson, as well. I just want to point out that in modern political history, the outcome of the Electoral College has twice determined a president that was different from the winner of the national popular vote. And in both instances, in the year 2000 and in 2016, Minnesota voted for the winner of the popular vote. So I think that if our goal is to give Minnesotans more power in determining the winner of a presidential race, wouldn't it be a better path forward to enter into the National Popular Vote Compact, which would actually make the votes of every single Minnesotan and every American count equally?
Senator Benson.
Madam Chair and Senator Fateh, but we are a representative republic, and the voice of the state, the voice of the uniqueness of the state matters as well. You don't remember, probably, I don't know your age, but do you remember when we were the only state that voted for Walter Mondale? The District of Columbia and Minnesota were the only states that voted for Walter Mondale. Under your model, Senator Fateh, even Minnesota wouldn't have acknowledged that Walter Mondale earned presidential electors. You see, every state has a different culture, a different political bent. I did a little bit of research. The votes out of Los Angeles County alone would negate the votes of the entire state of Minnesota. There would be no reason for a presidential candidate to come here and try to court us and pay attention to our unique needs as a state. So I very much support the Electoral College, but I also think it's important that we draw distinctions between different geographic regions of the state, different needs of the populations within those regions.
Thank you, Senator Benson. All right.
I guess
Senator Fateh, do you want to, you're on mute again.
yes, sorry, Madam Chair. I guess my follow-up question is, in that scenario, would that have changed the outcome of the election?
Senator Benson.
Madam Chair, no, it wouldn't have, but it would have completely masked the will of the people of Minnesota.
Thank you, Senator Benson. We'll go next to Senator Osmek.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to make a comment about the last discussion point. The compact for the popular vote is one of the most misguided ideas I think I've seen in a long time. Because what you're saying is that if 75% of the people of Minnesota vote for candidate A, and in the compact area, candidate B wins by a margin of 1 or 2 votes, just as a point, or 100 votes, that the state where 75% of the people voted for candidate A would flip to candidate B. In other words, the minority of 25% would be represented in the Electoral College by the state of Minnesota. It's absolutely one of the most undemocratic ideas I think I've ever seen in my entire life. I'm glad Senator Benson responded to that, but it is absolutely a terrible idea to say that you could take 75% of Minnesota and ignore their vote, and give it to a different candidate that we didn't support. We are a nation of 50 independent states. I think we need some civics lessons to understand we are a separate entity. The state of Minnesota is separate, but part of the greater whole. But that doesn't mean that we just take our rights and flush them down the toilet. Thank you, Madam President. Or I'm sorry, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Osmek. Senator Fateh, you have your hand up. Do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, for both thank you, Madam Chair, for both Senator Osmek and Senator Benson. So in 2000 and 2016, did the Electoral College empower or disempower the voters?
Senator Fateh, are you asking that of Senator Osmek or Senator Benson?
Both, Madam Chair.
Senator
take that one.
Fateh's question. Okay, Senator Osmek.
Senator Fateh, the Electoral College was represented by the votes that Minnesota put forth, which was the candidate that Minnesotans voted for. Again, you need to understand, in this country, we are 50 separate states, and the Electoral College was designed so that every state had a voice. Our voice was for, at that point, at that particular time, Senator Al Gore, or Vice President Al Gore, I'm sorry. That's the beauty of the Electoral College, is everyone has a voice at the table. And I'd also point out, with 10 electoral votes, if people want to just take and go to the national public vote or national popular vote, we would be losing effectiveness, because with our 10 electoral votes right now, by a percentage in the Electoral College, we're actually overrepresented at 10 votes. 9, I think we're still there. We're still even or maybe slightly above. So Senator Fateh, we need to defend the rights of the state of Minnesota, not cede them over to a bunch of people who are not Minnesotans.
Thank you, Senator Osmick. Senator Benson, do you want to add and comment?
I'll just cheer and echo what Senator Osmick said. He is exactly right.
Thank you, Senator Benson. I'll go next to Senator Howe.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Senator Benson, I take that the way that the Electoral College treats the states in dividing up the electoral votes, you just took that model and applied it to the state. So each congressional district isn't flyover either, that each congressional district now is important to presidential candidates. Is that what we are attempting to do here?
Senator Benson.
Madam Chair and Senator Howe, that does elevate the importance. This bill would elevate the importance of congressional districts. If we're looking at electoral decisions being made by a few electoral votes, it would definitely elevate. This more granular approach would elevate the importance of reaching out to those parts of Minnesota that are largely ignored. And specifically, the entire state of Minnesota would be ignored if we went to a national popular vote model.
Exactly. Very much so. Thank you, Senator Benson. Senator Clausen.
Madam Chair, question for Senator Benson. Currently, there's only 2 states that seat electors on a congressional basis. That's Maine and Nebraska. And Nebraska, we know, as a unicameral legislature. I'm just wondering, my first question would be, I'm wondering if you're aware of other states that are considering this at this time. And my second question would be that we do a census every 2 years, and we also have elections in the 0 years, 2020, 2030, 2040, and so on. We do that because of redistricting, and I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on those years where we have elections that end in 0, where the correct congressional districting has not been done, but the population trends may have switched, and so you're actually not getting accurate representation because of the population shifts and the lack of redistricting. Thank you.
Madam Chair and Senator Clausen, this committee will deal with some redistricting, and so I'm not going to purport to be an expert, but we do have a system set up. We can't adjust maps every 2 years. It just seems unworkable. And maybe someday somebody will amend our Constitution to change our census and reapportionment. But those 0 years where the population is shifted, Senator Clausen, we do remain with 2 electors that represent the statewide popular vote, just as our senators represent our statewide interests to balance out some of those concerns. And Senator Clausen, as you know, our districts themselves have had significant population shifts, yet we still only have 1 vote based on a district that was 10 years old. And so it's not a perfect system. I don't know that we want to be more frequent in redistricting. I think that would be quite disruptive, but by having the 2 statewide electors, I think it does balance out some of your concerns during those years of greater distortion.
So Senator Benson, I have a question for you in regards to that. Don't we as senators right now, we've already been elected in 2020, and I think because of reapportionment and census, we all know, because we know our districts well, they have shifted in population also, Senator Benson. Could you address the fact that we as senators every year, 2020, have the same situation?
And Madam Chair, I didn't state it as clearly as you did, but our districts are distorted as well. And we'll serve for another 2 years in these districts that are distorted post-census as we wait for the redistricting to be completed.
Thank you, Senator Benson. Senator Clausen, did you have another question? Your hand is up or a follow-up? Otherwise, I'll go to Senator Pratt.
I did, Madam Chair. I had asked 2 parts of the question. The other part was if there are other states that are considering seating electors on a congressional basis, since we only have 2 right now that do that. So thank you.
Senator Benson.
Madam Chair, I apologize, Senator Clausen. I wasn't prepared for that question. This is something that I've been thinking about for a while and finally made some space on my calendar to bring a bill forward. And so this was not model legislation brought from someone. This was an idea that I wanted to carry, and I appreciate the committee making time to hear it.
Thank you, Senator Benson. Minnesota can be a forward-looking state as well. Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Not so much a question, but just really support Senator Benson's idea. I think this is something I've been thinking about for a while, and I'm glad she brought it forward. You know, when I think of our state with 4 Republican and 4 Democratic representatives, I think it's a great way for Minnesota to reflect that we are, in fact, a purple state, and that we are contributing to the election of our president in a way that reflects the voices of all Minnesotans proportionally. You know, whether it's, you know, for or against one party or another. And, you know, we can get into the debate of you know, national popular vote, and Senator Fateh is welcome to bring a bill. I just, you know, I want to stick to the bill that's in front of us and support Senator Benson, because I think this is a great way to really give all Minnesotans a voice in who our next president will be, and reflect the makeup here at the state capitol as well as the makeup in Congress as being reflective of that voice. So thank you, Senator Benson.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Pratt. Senator Carlson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question on just the informational background here. We've known for quite some time that there's been some initiatives to do this kind of electoral assignment, but then there's the opposite as well. And I'm, you know, kind of capitalizing on Senator Glossen's question. Do you know what states are what states that have winner take all are trying to maintain that winner take all, and which ones in contrast are trying to do the seat, you know, the congressional district assignment or some other method like that? Because I'm under the understanding that there are groups that are actually supporting both initiatives depending on what that state is. For instance, you wouldn't want to have a congressional district one maybe in Georgia, because there's some very strong DFL or Democratic congressional districts and some very strong Republican. And so that the winner take all there, the people who are not getting those elector votes are feeling that they're unfairly discriminated against. But then there's some others that may be very strong red states that would not want to have 1 or 2 electors be able to break from the state in a winner take all system. So do you have a feel for what states are evaluating those?
Senator Benson.
Madam Chair and Senator Carlson, I haven't looked into what other states are doing. I can try to do that. If this bill were to pass and be on the floor, I'll try to do some deeper research into other states, but I am primarily concerned with our electors as we are apportioned, as we are moving through another redistricting, being reflective of the variety that is in Minnesota. Different economic perspectives, different political perspectives, different cultural perspectives. I don't think it's really a red versus blue issue. We have the opportunity to be more clear about the differences that are in Minnesota without it being aggressive and disruptive and destructive. It would give a little more voice to places that maybe weren't as well reflected by a mere percentage, and certainly not by a national popular vote.
Thank you, Senator Benson. In regards, by the way, to the popular vote and the historical, the year 2000 in particular, I know folks know, though, that in that particular situation at that time, the state of California is a very large state, 55 plus thereabouts electoral votes. So a lot of votes from the state at all. But they had a policy then that ballots that came in, absentee ballots, military voters, overseas ballots, they had a court order. They had to wait 10 days to give just those ballots extra time to get in to the state of California. But when they added up the quantity of them, and even if they all voted for one particular person, but those votes would not have changed the outcome, they did not even open them. They didn't open them, they didn't count them. And so when you talk about a national popular vote, it isn't so simple at all in regards to connecting them with congressional districts. Even there, matter of fact, I think fairly recently, I think it was the last congressional seat had a recount and had issues going on, was finally resolved. We don't realize sometimes that we have state elections for federal offices. We don't have federal elections. And there's an important reason that each state is able to determine within it. And that's why the Constitution placed it there, so that each state could have that self-determination as they vote for federal offices. All right, members, this bill is going to be laid over. And so we will do that. Senate File 429 is laid over for possible inclusion or future action. Thank you, Senator Benson. Appreciate
Thank
you being
you,
here.
Madam Chair and members. Have a good day.
Thank you. All right, we will go to the next bill. And with that, I will hand the gavel over to Senator Howe.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Senator Kiffmeyer, you have Senate File 651. Would you like to move your bill?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I move Senate File 651. And members, 651 is a bill that would include the concept that we passed into law before, that when you have polling places for the best interests of the voters, that those polling places would be established by December 31st of the prior year, and that they be the same polling places, and that other polling places would be choosing to use one of those designated prior. And the reason for this is voters need to know where they go vote. This is about public information. We don't know who may be new to a precinct, others as well. So the very plain reading of the language is that any other polling place designated by the county auditor pursuant to this section must be at a precinct polling place designated pursuant to section 24B, as I explained, and be open for in-person absentee voting for the entire absentee voting period during the same days and hours as the office of the county auditor is open for in-person absentee voting. So the reason why we passed that original bill at establishing polling places that will be consistent and will be the same is because of the voters. Voter information, when they go to the polling place finder to look up their information, it shouldn't be on a day-to-day basis. They ought to be established, they ought to be known to the voters, and that they would be able to have a greater degree of participation by having those established. That was the whole concept behind establishing polling places in your and having them known and being able to have a degree of certainty about the polling place location. That's a benefit to the voters that I think is very, very important and certainly consistent. The concern is the politics of it, that these polling places could be moved for reasons other than just plain having a location to come vote. So that's why I am introducing this bill, Senate File 651. And with that, Mr. Chair, I will be glad to answer questions if needed.
Thank you, Senator Kiffmeyer. Any questions or comments from the members? See, Senator Fateh.
Thank you, Chair Howe. And this question is for Senator Kiffmeyer. Thank you. So as a senator for South Minneapolis, I want to just note a couple of things in regards to this bill. The first is that last year, during the pandemic of COVID-19, we actually saw record-breaking early vote participation. And this allowed for far greater participation, which avoided congestion on the last day which we typically see in different years, right? And when we look at which types of buildings are precinct polling places, they tend to be churches, community centers, elementary schools, those kind of places. And last year, actually, tens of thousands of voters voted in person at the Minneapolis early voting center, which was in Northeast Minneapolis. And it was the city elections office staff that provided parking for folks. They had a ton of friendly, nonpartisan staff that were helping people vote, especially elder voters. And the Minneapolis elections office was not a precinct polling location. So under this bill, it would not have been permitted to be an early vote center. Is that correct, Senator Kiffmeyer?
Senator Kiffmeyer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and Senator Fateh. You're asking a very specific question about specific polling places. The statute or the bill that I'm presenting here is to have a consistent polling place location so that those voters, any voter in the state of Minnesota, would know where to go vote, which is what helps to increase voter turnout, is having that established. That's why the original bill was passed and signed into law, because that's what's important to those voters. But as to those specific locations, they can be designated by the city in that December timeframe, and they have them designated. And if they, in their jurisdiction, feel that these are the locations that best serve for having a polling place, then that would be designated in that context. And polling places are generally handicap accessible. There's certain criteria that they have to have in order to be a polling place. And so those locations would have to fit that criteria as well. But once established, they should be there for the entire voting period so that you can tell, neighbors can say, hey, I went to vote, where'd you go vote? I went to vote here, they go there to vote and it's changed or moved. So we want that consistency of those locations. But locations are a choice of Hennepin County or the city of Minneapolis, whichever in that particular situation, and also the choice of the establishing polling locations is a local control issue as well. So as to your specifics, I couldn't possibly answer that. And it is for the most part moot because those polling places are established not today and not through this bill, but they're established through the local action prior to the first of the year.
So Senator Kiffmeyer, what you're saying is if they decided they wanted to establish that location as a polling place, they could.
Mr. Chair, yes, that is correct.
Thank you, Senator Kiffmeyer. Senator Fateh, follow up?
Yes, and I think I should clarify. So just to clarify, first, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to clarify, so if a location is not a precinct polling place, then it is not allowed to be an early vote center. Is that correct?
Senator Kiffmeyer.
Thank you, Senator Fateh, Mr. Chair. It depends, Senator Fateh, as I've explained before. These are established prior to the election year, right? So could they be is the answer. They could be, but it is not this bill that determines it. It is the local unit of government who makes that determination.
Thank you, Senator Kiffmeyer. Senator, additional follow-up? Otherwise, I'm going to go to Senator Carlson.
That's it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Senator Carlson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator, I guess I'm a little bit, trying to imagine how this will work. In Dakota County, we had 2 drop-off boxes. One was at the city, well, both of them were at the county service centers. And they would allow people to deposit their ballot similar to being able to mail it in. This would be a drop-off box that has all sorts of security, things like that. Now, are you saying that a drop-off box would have to be open also for the entire period? Or is this something that drop-off boxes would not even be allowed?
Senator Kiffmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Senator Carlson. This bill has nothing to do with drop boxes. There's not the language in the bill that has anything to do with drop boxes. As a matter of fact, it clearly states that this is a polling place. It's the place where you actually go to vote. A drop box is where you drop off your ballot, not that you stand there and vote in front of this drop box that is not currently anyway how it's being used at all. So this is about a polling place where you actually go to mark your ballot and put it into a ballot box within that polling place. So this bill has nothing to do with drop boxes.
Senator Carlson, follow up?
Just to make it clear, then this would not have any effect on drop-off boxes.
Senator Kiffmeyer?
Well, Senator Carlson, Mr. Chair and Senator Carlson, this bill has nothing to do with drop boxes.
Thank you, Senator
Okay.
Kiffmeyer.
So
Senator Carlson, follow up?
yeah, I just want to hear that there's no prohibition on drop-off boxes due to this bill.
Senator Kiffmeyer, I think that's what you've already stated.
I've already
that's
stated,
addressed.
yes, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. If that's all, Senator Carlson, I'll go to look like Senator Clausen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to clarify, as I understand the bill, this would require regular polling locations to be open during the in-person absentee process of voting. I assume with that, there's going to be some additional costs. There could be some issues about workers shortage at the polls, potentially. I'm just wondering if there's a fiscal note that needs to be attached to this, and I'd be open to your comments on that point. Thank you.
Senator Kiffmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Senator Clausen. Well, first of all, this particular section of statute applies to an eligible voter may vote by absentee ballot in the office of the county auditor and at any other polling place designated by the county auditor during the 46 days before the election, except as provided in this section. And so this is specific to absentee voting. And Senator Clausen, could you clarify I think the other question you had was about the cost. I see this as actually saving money, because when you have a previously designated polling place that has been selected and chosen as required by current law that you establish these prior to, it will be known. I think it's more expensive if you're moving polling places around, hold them open for a while, move them somewhere else, hold them open for a while. And that's not good for the consistency of the voter and knowing where to go vote. And it's also costly to move equipment and move those things at that time. So what this does is take a polling place already designated and then saying, if you're going to have any other polling place, it's at one already designated pursuant to that statute, and that it be open for that entire time. That is the spirit and the intent of this section of law to begin with.
Thank you, Senator Kiffmeyer. Looks like Mr. Erickson has a comment on this. We'll let him interject here. Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Senator Clausen. I just wanted to comment because you asked about a fiscal note. This bill wouldn't need a fiscal note. In my reading, all of the requirements here would be either optional or imposed on locals, and so a local impact note might get at some of that, probably not very well or very quickly, but there would be no cost to the state itself that would be able to be recorded in a fiscal note.
Well, thank you, Mr. Erickson. Senator Clausen, follow up?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. My point is, though, that these locations are going to be open for longer periods of time than currently. So wouldn't there be some additional costs? And as Mr. Erickson correctly pointed out, it's going to be passed on to the local government units.
Senator Kiffmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Senator Clausen, let's understand that elections require polling places. That is current law. Current law already does. There's no mandate here. It's saying that if you do, it should be a polling place already designated by the local unit of government that we know is sufficient for the work of voting. And if it does, and it makes that choice. So there's no mandate whatsoever. There is no mandated cost because of that, because there is no mandate. It's an option. And I think that in regards to the local units of government, they're already required to have polling places to meet the needs of voters.
Thank you, Senator Kiffmeyer. Senator Clausen, another follow-up?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as I'm hearing you say that this is totally optional, is that correct?
Senator Kiffmeyer, I think you've already stated that. It sounds like it's if this, then this is what, if you're going to do this, this is what you must do to comply. Is that not right, Senator Kiffmeyer?
Mr. Chair and Senator Clausen, as I said again, it says an eligible voter may do this. Any other polling place designated to this section, if they do that, then they need to comply with subdivision 1 and sub 2. So be at a precinct polling place already designated, be open for the entire absentee voting period. And that is the plain language reading of this proposal.
Senator Fateh.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator Kiffmeyer. Sometimes in Minneapolis, we have increased hours in multiple polling places during times of high volume, and when we see a rush, like the last 3 weeks leading up to an election. So in other words, there might be one early vote center for the entire 46-day period, or and also 3 centers during the last or final 3 weeks. So unless our local operations could keep all 3 centers open for all 46 days, isn't it correct that we would have to reduce our overall capacity to conduct early voting?
Mr. Chair.
Senator Kiffmeyer.
Yeah, Mr. Chair and Senator Fateh, your hypothetical situation is not what this bill deals with. It deals with a local decision to do that. So they are going to be able to have their polling places, but if they choose them, especially for early voting, and by the way, these local units of government, first of all, an election is not a surprise event. It is well publicized everywhere. And so without question, also, these local units of government know their jurisdictions, and they already have the responsibility to provide for polling place locations according to current law to meet the needs of the voters in their area. And they're very different in every part of the state. But the one thing that is certain is people will want to go vote, and that these polling places be in a location that is generally convenient. Now, some people will live across from a polling place. Others will drive, as they do in northwestern Minnesota. But those people are used to going to town for groceries and for using transportation for a variety of reasons. So the local jurisdictions will have the opportunity to consider the needs of their particular areas and accommodate them and to make those decisions. That is the piece of it that is local control. What is of statewide benefit here, though, is for all voters to know their precinct polling places ahead of time, to know where they will be, and to have them open for that designated voting time.
So Senator Kiffmeyer, if you have any final words, otherwise we will lay this bill over. Any final words or?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. I think this is a very voter-friendly, very positive bill for the voters. The most frequent question we all know we get is, where do I go vote? How do I find out? Having consistency and having proper locations is in the best interest of the voters. And Mr. Chair, this bill will be laid over. So that is the conclusion of my remarks for today. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Kiffmeyer. And with that, Senate File 651 is laid over for possible inclusion. So Senator Kiffmeyer, now we have Senate File, you also have Senate File 652. So if you'd like to move that bill and carry on with the explanation of that bill.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and members. I'll move Senate File 652. And the sum of this bill has to do with election judges. And by the way, I'm always kind of surprising when people want to take the politics out of politics. If there's one thing we realize, we are politicians. We work in a political environment. The results of voting have political implications. The voters out there work together to endorse candidates with political parties, and they have the opportunity to be engaged in politicking themselves. And so, of course, members, we are here today as politicians doing political work, and it's not politicizing politics to talk about the business of the politics. And so here we are today, and one of the key tenets, which I think is so easy to forget, that when when you have election judges designated from different political parties, there's a public good, a vested interest in how they serve the rest of the voters who are going about their other business. And so when you have, a matter of fact, I worked myself as an election judge in the polling place on election day for 11 years. And some of my best friends have come from different election judges of different political parties from working together in the polling place for the common goal that we uphold the law as written, not as how we would like it or anything like that. But because you have a Democrat and a Republican in general, that is what it is, looking out over each other's shoulder in the administering of elections, the public good is they each have a vested interest in making sure that those rules, the laws, and the policies that are going on in the polling place on election day are adhered to. Their vested interest in a political party direction works to the good. But it cannot work if we don't truly have election judges from a designated party list functioning for real in the polling places. And so the other thing is that the political parties send forward names of election judges. And so their interest is to know which of these election judges served on the behalf of our party in the polling place on election day. So they have a vested interest in that, and this system and the process has for many, many, many years, decades, actually seen this as a public good activity. So in regards to the particulars of the bill, remembering though that municipal clerks and election get lists of election judges from each major political party. They are submitted to the Secretary of State, and then that information is passed on to the local units of government who do the actual process of appointing and choosing those election judges. And so in this particular case, it's taking that information and bringing it back again to each major political party who of the election judges served on their behalf in the polling place on election day. So this is gathering that information. Again, they receive this information. It's a matter of recording them and sending this information back to the Secretary of State, who will combine them into one list. And they will provide a single list of election judges to the chair of each major political party, be provided to the chairs between 14 and 21 days after an election. But the information on the list, just like all other lists that come from this source, must be used only for purposes related to elections or political activity. I think it will be very important for the political parties to know how effective was their recruitment, how many actually served and followed through with their commitment to do so, and to help make sure that the bipartisan representation in each polling place is sufficient to serve the public good. So that is a brief description of the bill, and I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Senator Kiffmeyer. Any questions from members? We have no testifiers, so Senator Carlson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And a question for probably both Senator Kiffmeyer and also Ms. Stengel is what is the limit right now of the privacy of election judges, the information that's kept by the city? Is it provided to any outsiders from the city, and who it is and how much of that information is provided?
I think we'll go to
Mr. Chair, I would have Ms. Stengel go ahead and reply to that first.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members, and Senator Carlson. I am not great with the data practices lingo, but I believe this is protected to some degree. I will have to follow up with our civil law counsel and have her get an actual answer for you, and I'll follow up with the committee.
And I think it's important to identify that that's where this is going next. It's going to go to civil law and data practices. So I think that's where that'll get addressed. Senator Carlson is in that committee. But Senator Kiffmeyer, did you want to respond? Or I think that's where the jurisdiction will go, and that's why it's going to the next committee, but
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That is correct. We will go into it more deeply, but to let you know, Senator Carlson, we have in this, it says notwithstanding section 13 must submit a list. And so it is creating an exception to the current process in regards to the communication of this information in a limited use.
Senator Carlson, follow up?
Yes, thank you. I am concerned, we want to make sure that we do have the appropriate by or more partisan representation in election judges, but I am concerned about divulging the names and addresses, especially the addresses, because it opens up the judges to politicization and even sometimes some harassment. I have to say that in the number of elections that I've been involved in, there are times when I know who the judges are in our city. I don't know how I got them. I don't know how the person that gave them to me got them, but I feel like that's an intrusion that we have had their names and addresses. So I'm concerned about that. And then adding to that, I know that in 2016, we had an incident where judges' names were somehow provided to an outside group that to some degree harassed judges. And they actually asked them to sign a petition. And I have that petition right here, and it's a petition stating that the Secretary of State was violating the Constitution by doing same day, or let's say self-certification. And the Secretary of State had to react to that and actually took it to court to have this petition ruled invalid. And then there was more, and I'll call it harassment of judges, where they were expected to take down the names, the addresses of people who came in and did self-certification. And that was to be provided to this outside group. And the election authorities said that that's against the law. You can't take information out of the polls. So I'm very concerned that we may be setting election judges of either party up for public ridicule, public, let's say, electioneering, anything like that. And, that may put a damper on being an election judge in the future. So I am concerned about that.
Well, Senator Carlson, I think that will be addressed in the next committee, and it's civil law and data practices, and I think that's exactly where it belongs in the jurisdiction of that committee. But Senator Kiffmeyer, if you want to respond, you may, but I do believe that that's why it's going to the next committee.
It is, Mr. Chair, and I think that the situation that Senator Carlson describes is abhorrent to all of us. That should not happen. I've never heard that before. I have had election judges stop me in the grocery store. I didn't call it harassment, though. They stopped me and wanted to talk about things and concerns that they had in the polling place on election day. And well, that will happen. But the big thing is it's not a secret, by the way. These people signed up to be election judges, and they signed up with their political party. So I think, the fact is that they are already public and have signed up. But yes, Mr. Chair, we will go ahead more so that we are able to get this bill to civil law, and I'll be glad to hear the members at that time.
Thank you. Follow up, Senator Carlson, or otherwise I'm going to go to Senator Fateh. Senator Fateh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this question, I guess this comment and question is for Senator Kiffmeyer. So we know in some districts we have overwhelmingly blue constituents and some that are overwhelmingly red, right? For example, if you were to poll the political party affiliation of the election judges in my district, honestly, I'm guessing that they'll be mostly Democrats. Likewise, I'm sure that in some of your districts, the election judges will skew the other way. But in either case, I have no concerns about our elections being judged fairly. My concern with this bill is that given the rhetoric that we saw coming from the election last year, about the election being rigged, citing voting machines, citing unfairness, none of which could be proved to be true, right? And some lawsuits even were thrown out by Republican appointed judges. And my concern is that this data would be used to try to discredit and invalidate the outcome of an election. Do you not share my concern?
Well, Senator
Mr.
Forte,
Chair.
Senator Forte, for that, you're thinking that the election judges only come from that precinct. They come from all over. You could have people from my district serving as an election judge in your district. There's no boundaries that you have to serve as an election judge. In fact, what they do in many cases, if my spouse decided she wanted to be an election judge, she couldn't serve as an election judge in my district. She'd have to go to another district. So, but I will let Senator Kiffmeyer respond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Mr. Forte, Senator Forte. That fact does not change the current law requirement. So I think that the danger comes from the issue of questioning and the whole point of having election judges from different political parties in every step of the process, whether it's absentee ballot boards or in the polling place on election day. There's a public good in what they do. And also, part of the public good is they work together. It's a good thing to put them together in the polling places for a common goal and being in a situation where they work together for the common good. And that party balance is current law. And just because they're in a red or blue or whatever they might be, they should still have party balance to protect them, if nothing else, so that they can say, hey, Democrats and Republicans, we were here together and we went through this process. So I'm glad that you have that confidence, Senator Forte, but it does not inhibit the principle that is the public good.
And thank you, Senator Kiffmeyer. And I will add that I think that if you had people actually adhering to this, you'd probably have less arguments about what's going on at the polling place. But with that, I see no more questions. Senator Kiffmeyer, final comments before we take a vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so members, just remember, this is not a secret duty. When you're an election judge, you're in the polling place on election day, people see you, you're in your neighborhood, they know you, you signed up with your political party, and having the information go back to that same political party, they have a vested interest in knowing that the law was complied with, that it was followed through, and to make sure that in the future, as they send names of election judges on behalf of their party, that they have those folks on this list who are ready, willing, and able to serve, have already been trained. There's a lot of public good that comes from this kind of information, but the most important thing is being an election judge is not a secret duty. So with that, Mr. Chair and members, I move Senate File 652 be recommended to pass and to be referred to the Committee on Civil Law and Data Practices.
Thank you, Senator Kiffmeyer. And members, if you can, all those in favor of Senator Kiffmeyer's motion to recommend to pass and be referred to Civil Law and Data Practices Committee, if you could unmute and give me a thumbs up saying aye.
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 And those opposed, a thumbs down and nay.
Hey.
Thank you. And with that, the ayes have it, and Senator Kiffmeyer 652 is on its way to Civil Law and Data Practices Policy Committee. With that, I see no more, nothing else in front of the committee, so I would say that the committee stands adjourned. Thank you very much, and thank you for your participation.